discussion with popular culture. Popular culture, I didn't really say this in first block. I hope I got it the rest. Pop culture prior to this were based on spontaneous events. It was where the masses, you get these harvest festivals and things like that. They were very isolated and local. We're going to begin to see that change. Popular culture, or what we might call pop culture, will begin to become more commodified. And we're going to see that right now. Let's go and get jumping. Popular culture. What is popular culture? As defined in class, it is the written and non-written lore of the masses. That comes straight from Dr. Spavogle's book. I do want to make sure you understand it's the culture of the masses. Popular culture can be found in music, social media today, movies, and other aspects. Anything that you participate would be considered part of pop culture. There is a key change during the Enlightenment, though. As I stated, pop culture prior to this moment was based on spontaneous events that occurred during the local at a local level. During this time period, the bourgeoisie began to see a value in standardizing popular culture so it can become a commodity to buy and sell. Once the bourgeoisie is able to do this, and it really takes off during the next century, but it is during this time period they begin to think, how can we sell it? And we're going to see a couple examples of that with such things as chapbooks. And please notice the nobles and the bourgeoisie, they begin to rise above this popular culture. They don't want to stain themselves with the dirtiness of the lower culture. And again, that's not me saying that that's kind of how they would view it. And I still think you feel that even in today's world. It's not the nobles, of course, in the United States, but it's definitely the bourgeoisie. There's definitely an elitism with certain groups of people that want to leave us lower people behind. When we look at this, I do want to point out popular culture has always been a place for an emotional outlet for the poor. There's a lot of exhaustion in these people. There's a lot of hopelessness. So what do we begin to see? And we see Carnival. And Carnival is one of the most popular events that even occurs today in Catholic countries. Carnival is the 40 days that precede Lent, a time period of sacrifice. So this was almost like a purge mentality. As you saw, that there's some sexuality to this. There's some sexual stuff. There's some physical stuff. There's just a really interesting aspect of culture here. This is primarily in Catholic countries, and the final day of Carnival is Mardi Gras. And I hope as you were reading through this, I hope you saw that really weird song about tools. We begin to see kind of the event. I think the most important aspect you can pull from this is that it really adds to the notion that the lower classes really had a hopeless life, and Carnival becomes something they live for. As Dr. Bogle said, half the year they're going to talk about what they're going to do, and then the next half of the year they're going to reflect on what they did. And it became a part where it was something they were living for, almost like what we might look at vacations in today's culture. And again, as we're looking through it, there are some odd things. And I did kind of, like I told you in class, it was surprising to me that we did do Carnival for an event for the homecoming, because again, there's some weird stuff here. But again, I don't think that's obviously what they meant. When we begin to see this, I do want to point out the poor, because the poor couldn't access the coffee houses in England. The poor, they don't have Carnival because it's not a thing in Protestant countries. They get rid of it. And what do? They find themselves in drunkenness. The poorest of poor. During the 18th century, you have this gin craze. And I love this image by William Gothars, the Gin Lane. He is a early urban reformer who's attempting to call attention of the upper classes to the plight of the poor. The gin craze was similar to the 1980s crack epidemic, where we see hundreds, if not thousands, of people die because of their overindulgence in the chosen drug. And in this sense, it's a gin craze. There's a lot of weird stuff going on in this. You can ponder this, but I do want to point out it's all meant to get to the emotions of the upper class. This political cartoon would be found in maybe one of the magazines along with a story about what's going on. Because remember, the upper class, the high culture, is not engaging at this level. And we see taverns in your textbook. We see also, and again, we see here, I love this quote about the gin lane: drunk for a penny, dead drunk for 2 pence. And when he meant dead drunk, they meant like you actually were so drunk you died. We can see this image here. This guy's starving again. All his wealth is going to gin. Again, a terrible time for the poor in England. This is kind of sandwiched between that price revolution and the eventual industrial revolution. There is a sense of hopelessness on the streets. We begin to see pop culture and literacy. We see the rise in primary schools throughout Europe. This was kind of done through the Protestant Reformation, as we talked about, but we even see it in Catholic areas. I do want to point out Volksschooling is the example Dr. Spivogo uses, because even in Eastern and Central Europe, the governments begin to see the need to have a literate group of masses. Volksschooling was really about teaching. The purpose was nationalism, work ethic, and piety. Piety is about the religiousness. So nationalism, they're going to utilize German. That's what the word Volk means. If you circle that, Volk means the German people. So the Austrian Empire is meant to create a national identity through the German language. I want to remind you, the big problem with the Austrian Empire was it was a multinational. So they're attempting to superimpose the German language in the entire group through Volksschooling. And the hope is to create a sense of unity. They also focus on work ethic because they believe one of the reasons why the poor are poor is because they don't have a work ethic. And the piety is the idea that they're going to teach Catholicism. Not a shocker, the Austrian Habsburgs are trying to superimpose Catholicism on their people. And because of this success in primary schools, and again, as you power map, you do know Volkswagen only had a 25% success rate, and there's a ton of reasons for that. But throughout all of Europe, primary schools definitely saw a drastic increase in the literacy rate, especially for urban men. I think Dr. Spivogo here demonstrating that there's an increase from 28% in 1710 to 85% in 1789, really demonstrates this drastic increase. And I want to point out the bourgeoisie. This is where pop culture becomes commodified. I'm not sure if that's a word. I like it to turn into a commodity. The way they do it is with 85% literacy rate, they began to realize the poor want to read. So they create these things called chapbooks. Here's an example of a chapbook called The Tale of Robin Hood. It dates back to the 1700s. It's a wonderful illustration of chapbooks. And the whole purpose of chapbooks was to teach virtue to the lowest levels. These chapbooks were meant to be used as toilet paper after they were used, so there's not a lot of them behind. The ones that are left are really valuable because it demonstrates it's an artifact of the culture of the time. Now, conclusion, right? So we're looking at conclusion here. We see the idea that the art of the age really illustrated the conflict. We see nobles versus the bourgeois, nobles versus the philosophes. We saw Rococo versus neoclassical. We also see the idea of, we talked about the idea, we got that, boom, boom. We also talked about the idea of high culture, really saw a merging of nobility and bourgeoisie. That's going to be important for the next two chapters. The next two chapters will be Unit 5 put together. We'll see how that unfolds. And the popular culture really began to resonate as the bourgeoisie attempted to standardize it and make a profit. There is some chaos there, as we saw with Carnival, but again, and the Gin Alley, and ultimately that brings us to an end. I hope this loom helps.